This is the time of fulfillment. God is about to arise and take back what is his, and your own eyes will see it. If only you do your part. If only you spared nothing to make it happen. So how is it that I am saying with absolute certainty to you now that the most amazing news you could possibly imagine also just so happens to be true? Because God told Noah the flood would happen, and it did. And because God told 99-year-old childless Abraham that he would be the father of many nations, and so it happened. And because God told Israel's prophets that the Christ would come to save us, and so he did. And because God sent his angel to a lowly virgin from Nazareth to announce his incarnation, and incarnate of this Virgin Mary he was. Because this God made man promised in the greatest prayer, the only prayer he taught, that his kingdom would come and his will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. And because God has now spoken to another lowly virgin of our own era to announce to the world that the time for the fulfillment of his prayer has come. He has come to an ordinary woman named Luísa to tell the world through her that all he asks of us is that we earnestly beg him for the coming of his kingdom. private revelation. It doesn't do away with anything that came before. In fact, it presupposes that you are already doing your best to be a friend of Christ's, heed his gospel, and become a saint. It changes no laws, no doctrines, and no sacraments. And it doesn't replace any of the private revelations heaven has already blessed us with. In fact, it makes all of those calls even more important, since responding to them can now be done in the divine will and accomplished even more powerfully. But it is the crown of all private revelations, the one that they've all been leading us toward, and the one in which they all find their fulfillment. Search all the private revelations in the history of the Church. This is the only one you will find that was given the express mission by Jesus of ushering in the fulfillment of the Our Father prayer. The coming of the kingdom of God on earth is promised by more prophecies, popes, and approved revelations than I can count. But only one, not only promises the era, but also itself has the power to bring the era about. That is, these revelations on the divine will. And their becoming known is up to you. By watching this video, you've been called to join the most elite fighting force in history. You've been called to join our elite militia hastening the dawn of the era. And here are your 3 battle orders. First, you need the gift of living in the divine will. Don't let a day go by without saying repeatedly, Jesus, I trust in you. Thy will be done. I give you my will. Please give me yours in return. Let your kingdom come. Let your will be. Or go to proclaimthekingdom.com. And that brings us to our third point. Proclaim this. Yes, lay down our lives. If proclaiming Christ the King ever requires the shedding of blood, that too.
Ai, não acredito.
The coming of the kingdom of God on earth is promised by more prophecies, popes, and approved revelations than I can count. But only one, not only promises the era, but also itself has the power to bring the era about. That is, these revelations on the divine will. And their becoming known is up to you. By watching this video, you've been called to join the most elite fighting force in history. You've been called to join our elite militia hastening the dawn of the era. And here are your 3 battle orders. First, you need the gift of living in the divine will. Don't let a day go by without saying repeatedly, Jesus, I trust in you. Thy will be done. I give you my will. Please give me yours in return. Let your kingdom come. Let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
É isso aí, gente. Tá vendo como eu ralo por vocês? Mas é isso aí. É isso aí.